Morning, everybody. Welcome to Red Morning. Obviously, we're running solo, at least for the first little bit here, so I'm sure everybody can guess why. All right, so the plan moving forward here is going to do a chat for the first hour and then going to have a guest on for the second hour, keeping this stuff fairly normal, conversational. And actually, I'm just talking to our special guest right now, so bear with me 2 seconds. Around. This week it's going to be, I don't know if you guys know him. His name is Quincy. He's the one guy on Twitter that I met, really switched on. He's a truck driver from the States. I actually got him onto intermittent fasting and he's down about 60 pounds now. He's kind of like a mix of Hotep and Red Pill, so it's going to be a lot of good times. Anyway, so I see in here El Ryan Sabag, Alpha Interactions, Jack, how's it going, brother? Gen Z, Eric Von Weddle, Dean Nip, Ribney, how's it going, everybody? Good to see you. Um, the topic, when we were first talking about this, it's funny because there's something about this space that you can't just proactively do it. I can never figure it out. Everybody always, and this is going to hark back to 2017. This was still when I was just an anonymous, but I was down in Orlando. Rolo invited me down there to speak. And I remember my first night, I was just sitting there in a room and there was maybe 20, 30 guys sitting there having drinks at the hotel the first night. And everybody was just telling their, I always called them the Batman origin stories. If you guys know, it's every new Batman movie, you have to show Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot. His parents have been shot more than anybody else on television. And I found it very strange that there was guys, I mean, there was a lot of guys that were overweight, obvious social problems. Sometimes they were just kind of old and worn, like they were missing that certain pop and stuff. And everybody loved to talk how they got done wrong by a woman. And it was kind of illuminating. Hey, Bagley. I realized that one, a lot of us guys, we like wallowing in our own self-pity. Like we prefer to cope than we actually do to make hard decisions. I don't think I met a person that night who actually wanted to get past his problems. He just kind of treated it like an entrance exam. Hey, you got a girl that cheated on you? Great, you're in the club. Come on in. And so I kind of made it my mission, and I had to redo a bunch of my speech anyway to focus on, instead of just saying how horrible hypergamy is, how bad women are, and that stuff, really provide guys with a roadmap. And I think that's with the core group of guys that I've been working with since the start. That's always been the goal. Another one you'll see in here who's been with me since the beginning is Rule Zero Dad, Corey. I mean, we still knew each other back when I was at my lowest and he was at his heaviest. So, like I said, I've always got time for that, man. In fact, if I see him in here and he wants to come on, I'll probably have him on in a bit here. Doing very well. Almost all the speakers block me on Twitter. Yeah, you know what? I wish them well. I hope they do well in this conference. The traditional conservative space is direly in need of somebody with some talent to give them what they go with. And I know out of that group, Tanner, really good guy when it comes to a traditional conservative married guy. I hope he gives them a lot of good value. But that's neither here nor there. Glossary of terms. So I always talk about the Batman origin story and testicular cancer meetings. I kind of wanted to give you guys some background on what that means. And then we're going to go into like ultimate fundamentals this for everybody. It goes with the path that just about every man takes in this space. And it's funny how common it is. Like none of us are very different. And I find it's a lot of comfort for guys when they realize that what they're going through is so common that you could basically write a book on it and working on it. So the Batman origin story is every guy's need to tell everybody about how the world has done him wrong. It's like this weird camaraderie thing, which I think it's kind of a bastardization of our natural instinct to want to group up, but that's fine. The testicular cancer meetings is where, and I'm not going to mention names, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of actually making hard choices, switching up your mental models, altering your brain plasticity so that way you can make changes, people just want to shift the blame onto other people. So I'll use an example here. Let's take a traditional conservative white picket fence guy. He is the ultimate plow horse. He does all the work. He brings home the bacon. When he gets home, he does the dishes because his wife is so tired after a hard day of what? I don't know what to tell you. Naturally, in those situations, wife leaves because they're not happy, because they're really only with the guy at this point for provision. So if they can get the provision from court order, so much the better. Then they just don't have to look at his stupid ass anymore. That guy will double down on the same things that he'd already done. And instead of saying, maybe what I'm doing here isn't ideal and maybe I need to change it, maybe my ideas of manhood as provisionment, maybe my ideas of a fair and just world are flawed and I need to alter it, instead of switching those up for something more positive, what the guy will do is he'll double down on it. We need to go back to conservative values, which, don't get me started on the politics thing there, but there is no such thing. I think I like how somebody put it where it was progressivism by driving the speed limit. And so those are testicular cancer meetings. It's okay, Bob. You can cry now. If you guys haven't watched Fight Club, you can see it there. Also, listen to Ayub Kalel. 80 people are watching and only 30 likes. Smash the like button. Small personal thing for me. I really like it. As I'm doing research to see who else is in this space on YouTube and elsewhere, I take a look at how their channels do, and everybody's bigger than us right now, which is fine. They've been around longer and lies are much more palatable. But the engagement I get from you guys is just insane. Like, as far as, likes, dislikes, comments, all the metrics that actually count, we are punching way above our weight. Like, I see channels with 800,000 subscribers that we actually do better here. So I know I say it often, and it was the very first thing I said on my speech in 2017 when I first came down to Orlando. But I truly am humbled by guys like you and the guys there who give me your attention and in some cases your affection here. And so I'm truly humbled that you put that much faith in me to provide value for you on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. when it would have been much easier just to sleep in or watch Sports Center highlights. So I guess this is just my way of saying thank you and fluffing up the audience just a little bit more than I already am. Where was I? Oh yeah, the testicular cancer meeting. And these all stem from something called learned helplessness. If you guys don't know it, it's a psychological concept. Actually, you know what? I'll explain how they came up with the concept. So back before they had medical ethics, people used to run all kinds of crazy experiments that they'd never pass muster today. The one they did in this time is they were putting dogs into metal cages and electrocuting them. And I don't remember what the theory was that they were trying to do. So what happened was they would lock the cage, they would shock the dog, and the dog would try and run and escape. He'd scratch at the thing, but he couldn't get out. And they would do this repeatedly over a length of time. And the control group would be a dog with an open cage. And that dog would get shocked, jump out of the cage, eventually just stop going into the cage. The dog that couldn't get out, he eventually just stopped trying to escape, and he would cry when he would get zapped, but they would just lay there. And here's the part that applies to us as men. Eventually, what they did is they took these dogs, split them up into other control groups. The one group, they opened up the cage and they started zapping them. And here's the funny part, and this is why this is all learned helplessness, is that even when that cage was open and they zapped the dog wouldn't leave. He would just sit there and follow his same mental models he had always followed. And that one really struck me, and it got me thinking. How many guys are divorced? How many guys have been falsely accused of domestic violence charges? How many guys have had girls treat them like absolute trash, and they keep coming back to the trough? And not only that, they'll actually defend her. It's like one of the most common things you hear from any divorce lawyer who's dealt with family law is that the guy doesn't say anything about what he wants. He just says he wants it to all go away and he wants to be fair to the girl. Which is weird because you think about it, a girl's cheating on him, taking his kids, accusing him of domestic violence. I mean, at that point, you have I can't think of like a more direct threat that you can articulate to a guy, and they're still like laying down in that cage and just whimpering when the zap happens. Oh yeah, the chimp and the ladder experiment, same thing. So there was a bunch of these ones. And so we had a lot of guys who were swapping notes, which was awesome. Sometimes it was single guys learning how to sleep with more women because they weren't able to sleep with any women. And this is a little bit of a history lesson for you. So this was back when PK Atheist, who has been since doxxed as Robert Fisher, started up the Red Pill subreddit. And there was a guy who I've only ever spoken to once or twice. He's very rarely comes out of the woodwork. His name is Isolos. He was the guy who created the married red pill. So his thought was that for a guy who's married, who has kids, who has a lot of investment in a situation and then finds this space, what he can't do is just next. A guy who's single, a guy who has plates, he can next a girl, never talk to her again, and is sorted out. While it's still usually the best advice when somebody's acting their absolute worst, for a married guy, that essentially means, yeah, I'm giving up my kids. Because, and I'll get into the reasons later if you guys really want to, but so he realized that there's a need for a set of tools that are maybe more subtle, more nuanced, and address the underlying errors as opposed to just cutting loose and starting again. So we created that place. And there's been a bunch of good guys since then. Count Pudiula, Bogey D6, Wine More Please, who's now weak and sensitive, myself. Who am I missing here? Steel Sharpens Steel. He's another guy I want to have on this podcast. He's been recovering from surgery here for the last little bit. You guys are going to love him. He's really switched on. And so it was neat because while normally it should have been, and a lot of guys have that impression that that this space is just about plating girls, having open long-term relationships and never settling down, being a forever bachelor, but it's just tools. And in this case, it was married guys who used these tools because they weren't pro-marriage, they're anti-divorce rape, which is kind of a hyperbolic term, but you get the idea. Sorry, quick look at the chats here. Vernon, no worries, man. I'm glad your food doesn't taste like crap. Honestly, it's one of the things that hurts the most is that when guys are in cutting and bulking meals, how they have like almost the worst food you can eat. It's amazing how you don't have to alter your calorie supplements and still have a good diet. So tools. So tools for the married guy. And this is where Robert Glover first came in. He is awesome. He's very switched on. He didn't even know he was part of this space until he got invited in. When I met him in 2018, he came down from Mexico to speak. And he thought it was absolutely hilarious and humbling that like 80, 90, 100, almost 200 guys were all walking up to him and saying how much of an effect his work had on their life. Because for him, he just wrote a bunch of stuff he had learned in his psychological practice, swapped notes, and then just went to retire. So the fact that he had done so much good, and that's one thing I got to say again, fluff in the audience. You guys really make these guys realize how much of an impact they're having. And so the one thing I liked, getting back to the topic here, is the married guys. And they learned that codependence was one of the biggest errors or biggest issues when it came to men today. Also found out, and this was, again, the topic of my 2017 speech, is that bravado guys have where, oh, whatever, just be more alpha, then you can solve anything. It's not really how it works out. Anybody you hear say that you just got to pour more alpha on your life is really, don't know if you're free tomorrow. We could, no more Mr. Nice Guy then. I might be. I'll talk to you after the cast. Oh yeah, codependent. So yeah, you can't do that because there was two guys, and here's some more terminology I use. I hate laying out jargon, but at least now we're getting some descriptions. I call them fallen alpha and the beta bucks. If you guys don't know, the beta bucks is the guy who works hard his whole life and knows that a wife and kids are the reward at the end of the rainbow. He's essentially the provider. The same way that guys are either topic of desire or a topic like the lover or the provider. And the same way that girls are the Madonna and the whore. So just one of those mental models. Mick Inks, thank you for the $10 super chat. Appreciate it. I wish you had a question at the end of that because I love addressing your stuff, but you know what? We'll just say thank you and leave it at that for now. So the problem with the provider is that he never really gets a girl's best. A girl will spend the same 10, 15 years that he spends building himself the best life that he can, having fun, enjoying herself, and giving guys, random guys that she'll never meet again, her absolute sexual best. And girls don't think about it that way, but guys do. That's why that a girl's notch count or the amount of men she slept with matters so much to guys, because they want to enjoy that, but a lot of them can't. And a lot of them are fine with that, just so long as when you do settle down with a girl and decide to start a family, she decides to give you her best too. But it doesn't work that way. If you guys remember, Rollo Tomasi has a great article, Saving the Best. And that's where he goes into great detail with a wonderful parabola, and or not a parabola, a parable. That's a math joke for you nerds out there. When Carl wakes up, he'll find it hilarious. Anyway, so saving the best, and that's what you get there. And that's these guys, out of quiet desperation, will eventually end up doing an internet search. And this is how most guys find their way to our space was, why won't my wife have sex with me? Why does she like the other guy that treated her so badly? And then they eventually find an article by somebody like Archwinger. Actually, it's almost always Archwinger. Now, on the flip side of the coin, you have the fallen alpha, or the guy who used to be on top of the world. And there's a great article from it by another guy who's one of the old guys here, Whisper. I think it was Whisper. And he said, it's why you don't want to be Chad. And it's the same thing when guys think of the alpha male personality, which doesn't exist, but you get what I'm talking about here. And the only thing they know is abundance. They've always had, hey, Carl, welcome on, man. I'll just finish the story about why you don't want to be alpha here, and then we'll chit chat. So the only game they know is abundance game. Any girl treats them badly, they just leave, walk away. They don't care because they're going to find another one. But here's the thing, and that's a great tool if you're super hot, if you're tall, if you're muscular, if you got a great attractive face and good charisma, it works out wonderfully for you. So here's what problem happens, and it's Carl's death by 1,000 concessions. That happens, and then the guy gets married and settled down for whatever reasons he wants to, and he's never had to develop any of these tools otherwise. So he has no boundary enforcement. He has no idea about how women can be at their worst. He's only ever seen them at their best. And so slowly over time, he'll concede points here, there, everywhere. Sometimes it's just maybe do a little chore play to help her out, because why wouldn't you? Girls are great and I love them. Maybe it's well, I can do tons of examples, but that's not the point. What eventually happens is some player down the line, and sometimes it's 7 years, sometimes it's the 10-year itch. I've even seen it go as long as when the last kid is out of college, and then the girl just flicks a switch, and it's like all that stuff he's ever done has never been there. My stepfather was like that, and it was really one of the saddest things to see, because when you leave a guy in that situation where he's been on top of the world and then all of a sudden has to deal with something unexpected that a less attractive man would normalize, he doesn't know how to react. And when you crush a man's worldview or his deep narrative like that, it's kind of similar to a narcissistic injury. All you're going to get is narcissistic rage. I think the only time I ever watched my stepdad, and he's the tough man. He worked up in the bush, ran a logging camp for 20 years, 16-hour days every day. Only time I ever saw him cry was when I watched his mental models crash down. And then we almost came to blows. We were about to fight. My brother had a bat in the background. I'm there, his hands around my throat's hands around his. And I can't remember how it got split up. But after that, it was our first and only heart-to-heart chat. And I realized, it doesn't matter. Even if you are the top of the food chain, that guy is still needing these same tools. And to a lesser extent, I think Rule Zero Dad's Batman origin story is a great example of that too. He's on top of the world, and then hardship happened and he wasn't able to deal with it. Sure enough, the one thing I will give these guys though is they know what a win state looks like. They know what genuine desire, sex, and top quality women look like. So they're usually much easier to bring back. It's those other guys that have never had it. They really don't believe you and they fight you every step of the way. Anyways, Carl's pouring himself some hair of the dog. I'll do some quick look at the chats here, and then we will have him on and find out how his life is going. Someone killed something. No idea what any of those words mean, so whatever. What really matters is when Ryan and Rolo and John and Carl have their own show. That's true. Honestly, great bunch of guys. The core group is always good. Rich, me, Rolo, John, like everybody. The part I love the best is none of us are ever perfect. Like everybody's got their faults, but it kind of makes us more human. I don't like guys who put on a polished veneer because I know they're hiding something. At least when you're seeing a guy with all of his flaws, as minimal as they may be, it just lets you know you're dealing with a real person. So that and the fact that they're switched on, and I can't stand no time for fools. So thank you, Carolina, for that vote of confidence. From Haley Barbs, my dad lost a lot of money on his divorce, but he's so much happier now to see joy gives him loving again. Funny story about that. So most guys are worried about losing all of their money in a divorce, whether it's because they worked hard and they deserve it, or because they're worried that the girl that will spend it all and then the kids won't have anything for when they go to college. What I've found is that 95% of the time, once a guy gets divorced, even though he has alimony or child support payments, he finds his disposable income goes up. So that cheaper to keeper thing, it's completely the opposite. It's one of those counterintuitive things you thought about. It's amazing how much girls cost to be with. All right. Anyway, so the end of the day, you start on guys like Robert Glover, and then guys will almost always go to the first book or first year of Rollo Tomassi. And the reason I like those two is because it's the quintessential or foundational example of practical application and top level theory. And I'll never understand why guys want to denigrate that or expect more out of Rollo than what it is. Because Rollo stuff is foundational. Robert Glover stuff is foundational. To want to expect anything more out of them than that, I think is very unreasonable. That's like asking your basement to function as an attic. Like, why would you do that? No, its job is to hold everything up. So just treat it like it is.
Yeah, sorry about that, Ryan. I was up late last night burning bridges.
No idea what you're talking about. But that's good. I know you got a plan right now to go back to old school Carl, where it was you being able to just shoot the shit and enjoy yourself with a bunch of guys. You got too big for that.
Yeah, no, I actually learned something interesting last night.
What's that?
Well, because I was always wondering, what does it take to have your endorsed contributor taken away from the fag pill Reddit? And apparently, anti-Semitism is fine. Talking about gas things are fine. Talking about the final solution is fine. Overt racism is fine. But under no means tell the guy who started the subreddit to grow a fucking pair. So apparently that was it. Just shit, I didn't get. I was like, okay, what is it going to take to make this guy take a shot? And it was apparently that's it. Call him a dickless wonder and tell him to make a fucking call.
Fair enough. Well, I guess he made a call. All right, but
it frees up my time though.
That's true. Hey, speaking of which, freeing up the time. So we were just I'm just talking foundations. I realized since the dust up happened over the last week, like everybody, well, even you, like you can't stop people from following you. You're just way too popular for your own good. You went private, you got angry, and you still got like 200 requests.
Yeah, it's insane. It's well, I didn't get angry. I just thought it was kind of when we get to the point where like you have Brutus the Barber sending me dox threats. And he's not even using the good picture. I mean, at least do me the favor. At least do me the favor of using the good picture if you're going to threaten to dox me.
Yeah, I don't like that stuff. Those were dark times. We basically lost Royce from that. Robert Fisher, a whole bunch of other people. I know, it's just very sad because we're really our own worst enemy. As much as guys keep saying they're there to fight the fight against feminism, it's like gamma males, beta male, like that's really the worst thing about it. Guys that just want to wallow in self-pity and bring everybody with them. But that was the point of this. So I figure we have all these new people that have just heard about us now, and they came for the drama, and that's fine. But now we can actually explain to them what the heck we do here. And I thought that's a wonderful thing. Like, how did Carl get so popular? Why is Gendernomics written? Why is Robert Glover and Rollo Tomasi considered off limits when you want to take pot shots at somebody?
Yeah, why is Carl calling Leonard Red Pill Riot a fucking pussy? I don't know, it's interesting.
I take it you're on the Bloody Mary's hair of the dog right now?
Yeah, like I said, I was up late last night burning bridges.
Yeah. Well,
I've spent the last like 2-3 years on here, just not to step on your fundamentals thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my goals here in the past 2 to 3 years was to build bridges and kind of help build a community of men that were all working towards the same end.
Same.
And all I'm seeing is, like, with the exception of you and maybe a couple other dudes, for the most part, guys are just out for themselves. So I decided, screw this. I'm not going to pinch my nose and work with them anymore. I'm just going to burn them to the ground.
And stick to the fundamentals. Hey, you know what? I can't argue with that. Like, you're not wrong. But that's, you know what? It's one of those things I think that we had to learn, at least I had to learn the hard way. Gave it a good college try. At this point now, I mean, we still did build a pretty good network. There's a lot of switched on guys out there. There's just a lot that maybe need some work.
Yeah, I mean, I met a lot of good guys off this, so I'm very happy about that. But I also met a lot of guys who ended up in a position of, like, influencer or shot caller or whatever you want to call it, that should not be in that position. And that's either because of their, Rich did a great video on it called, The Problem with the Manosphere.
I missed it when I had the typo and he called it the monosphere.
Yeah, the monosphere. But that's probably a good idea too, because it makes me sick. But the whole thing with it is there are a lot of guys who ended up in positions in this space of ours that probably should not be in those positions. And the unfortunate thing with that is it doesn't matter if they're like a content creator who has a blog that gets like 200 views a day. It matters when they're in charge of large platforms or if they're major influencers, because my contribution to Rich's video was the statement that you have too many blind men selling one-eyed men. You have too many one-eyed men selling blind men glasses. And what I meant by that statement was simply that you have a lot of guys who they've never practiced anything. They're good with highfalutin theory. They're basically guys who never practice, but they want to preach. Because they join this club and they see that, oh, I can get status within this community by posting. And they start posting, and their contributions are not good contributions.
The clubhouse masculinity. They wanted to be part of a group.
So that was kind of what I was, that was part of what I was going on off on last night.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing I've noticed. And as much as I always crap on the Batman origin story, every guy I've found that I've not just worked with, but enjoyed spending time with, they all have one and they kind of lead with it. And the one thing that differs is their Batman origin story never really has, like, they don't try and sugarcoat it. You don't say, well, I was at my lowest, but there was no but in it. It's like same as when you were talking about your ex-wife, or me when I'm talking about when the military basically threw away 10 years of chance for a lost boy to find meaning. Like, everybody who's got good ones, like really good ones, they really are like horrible stories and they don't fluff it up. But I guess that's the thing. You kind of have to have a humility to learn what healthy narcissism looks like. Is that a fair? I think that works that.
Well, I think the whole thing with healthy narcissism is that you're confident and secure in your abilities, and you may overvalue them somewhat, but you still have the other half of your brain to do risk analysis and know that your poop still smells like poop. drop three F-bombs on the first sentence on the show, and now I care about monetization.
We'll see. Honestly, I can't figure out how it works. actually had a chat last time with the guys on Twitter where it wasn't so much for the money because YouTube doesn't really pay, but I know YouTube likes getting money. So if you have the green icon for your monetization, it's more likely to be recommended to other things. So it's really, I find the reach is to be the best metric, and the monetization is just a nice little secondary characteristic.
Oh, by the way, the purge has me down about 200 followers so far, so it's working.
Oh,
I do have
congratulations.
like a I do have like 100 new follower requests, but I'm not letting anyone else into the clubhouse until
You're down to
people.
24,000.
I'm not sure. 24999, I think, was the Michael Medici sweet spot.
Yeah, I saw that. That's funny. I sometimes forget how many followers you guys have. Like, I don't know what that translates to. It's internet pixels, so it's anybody who takes it too seriously kind of makes me chuckle anyway. It's just internet points, but
Well, the whole thing with it was just like if you make a joke like, "Oh, keto vegan," so you're basically eating avocado and doing olive oil shots, and you have like 800 people in your mentions telling you you're a dumbass and you don't know what you're talking about. That gets
hmm.
tiresome, and it just takes away time from talking about the fundamentals. And that was kind of what I was noticing. It's like I was spending way too much of my time not talking fundamentals and way too much just spurging or hurting spurg.
I know it's autism's always our go-to, but at sometimes you kind of like it's not wrong. But here's the thing I found too. So you're right about that. Like a lot of hate you get as soon as you put anything about yourself out there. That's why I love, oh, excuse me, talking about this stuff because it all still applies. Like people think it's just about getting laid, but then once you internalize it, once you get that abundance, here's the part that makes me laugh. The same agree and amplify, amuse mastery, pressure flips, all the tools that we use when it comes to intersectional dynamics, they still apply here. It's almost like they're just psychological mental models that help you navigate the real world. It's just that women are the greatest way to get a feedback on it to see and really hone your game because there's really a binary state. Like, did you seduce her or did you not? Like, you can't BS yourself. Well, you can, but it's painfully obvious when you do.
Well, I also like it because, like, the major issue I think a lot of guys are facing in their fundamentals is they've never challenged themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go lifting, the point isn't to, trend yourself up and become a bodybuilder. The point is to elicit real feedback from reality. And
And
you
gain
get
comfort
that from
outside of your
lifting.
discomfort zone.
Because like if you put like 400 pounds on the bar and you try to deadlift that on your first day,
Mm-hmm.
that bar will give you immediate feedback that you can't lift this. Same thing with if you go and talk to the pretty girl in the grocery store and she shoots you down. It's like, sorry, man, you don't have the game to pick her up.
Yep. Yeah, it was funny. I was talking
That's
with a
kind of the
Christian
point.
guy, and he was talking. I don't mean to cut you off there, but he was talking about how he was worried about his son, and he didn't want to have him like plate a bunch of chicks and be a Lothario playboy. But he realized that he might have to do that so he doesn't get divorced later on down the line. I'm like you don't like plates don't necessarily mean like you don't have to sleep with a girl to be a plate. You just have to have her in your rotation, like be able to. But that's the problem is that you have to do it because we are infinitely skilled at pretending we coulda if only. So you kind of have to be a bit of a degenerate because otherwise you're just going to pretend you're going to be a degenerate and you still aren't.
Well, I think the whole thing with it is I don't necessarily I like sleeping with girls, but I don't necessarily like I told some of my coworkers my notch count on a given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those Joker moments where everyone just lost their mind.
Oh, that's why you got a plaque or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the whole thing with it is just do it, don't talk about it. And, if it's against your beliefs, it's very hard to think about that because I never had that problem because, like I've told a lot of people in my Twitter feed over the purge moments,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fairly hardcore atheist, so I never had to kind of cross that bridge of the dissonance between what I had to do in the real world versus what the book of old stories told me to do. So that's kind of the thing I think we're missing in our little space, is a guy who has those beliefs and is good at actually bridging that with the lifestyle.
Yeah, well, that's why I always had so much fun with Tanner. I think he was a Mormon who got a divorce. Like, that's a big deal. I know to us it sounds kind of passe, but to that religion, that's crossing the Rubicon, man. And
Yeah, I
people can
know.
say what they want
I was
about him, but
surprised when you told
he
me.
has switched on that way.
Well, I was surprised when you told me about that.
Yeah.
I always had him pegged as the guy who married his high school sweetheart, been with her for like, he's what, 33, been with his high school sweetheart for 20 years or whatever.
Nope, that's
I
the
was
thing.
very surprised.
Yeah, there's nothing about Tanner I can say that doesn't make me like him a little bit more. Like, even just that little one where he decided, because he didn't want his kids to know a world, like he wanted to know that he could do violence if he had to protect his kids. So he did train boxing, went himself, took a match, took a loss, videotaped the whole thing. I'm like, talk about getting outside your comfort zone. Going from turn the other cheek to, I want to see if worst case scenario, I can protect my family. And he actually took steps to do that. Like, what is red pill if not that?
Well, I think the most amazing thing with that is, don't let a Mormon out red pill your ass. Like, you're sitting in your parents' house, talking about how you should read Evola, and you have a Mormon out there boxing.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Have you ever heard one? Oh, sorry. Quick hello to Peter Crozen. Thank you for the €2 super chat. He asked, do you guys plan on making a new Red Man group? The answer is yes. Right now, after this dust up, everybody is buckling down and getting our houses in order, keeping the fundamentals, letting all the drama pass, and it's going to be out sooner than you think. The name for it, I think, is really cool too. So.
Yeah, sorry, I'm reading my Twitter notifications. I mean, even with the purge going on now, I have like, I wake up to like 99 plus notifications. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and it seems
It's
like
not
when
though.
you try,
Here's the thing. Remember when guys were worried about a girl leaving them, so they're afraid to do hard things, be mean, stand their ground, because they're always worried about the girl leaving? And it's the exact same example there. Like, people will put up with anything except for being bored or losing a high value man. In your case, it's obviously not the same as like a marriage, but it's the same psychological concept. Your content and what you do is valuable enough to 30,000 people that until you bore them, I don't think you're going to lose anybody. And the few people you are losing, I would almost assume that's Twitter purging accounts that haven't been active in a while than actual people deciding they don't want to listen to you anymore. Oh, willing to wager
yeah,
that
I'm just
one.
trying to get to the point where, I'll so I did the first part, and I'm sorry to step on the show topic here. I'm still getting my hair of the dog in, and to be honest, I'm still kind of drunk from last night, but you'd be surprised how much fun it is when you spend like 16 hours drinking and you're like, okay, I already hit the vegans, I already hit the trad cons, I only lost like 50 followers. Let's go ahead and hit everyone else I can think of, and you just go off the top of your head and you just speed hit them in your Twitter feed.
Yeah, it was definitely, and the new mask was kind of cool too. I saw Tate gave you a shout out. He thought that was awesome. I think he took that as a real compliment, saying out of all the people that you'd love to go and have a drink with them someday in Romania or Transylvania or whatever Eastern European bloc country he used to be from at whatever day.
No, if I remember correctly, what I said was like, I'll burn this account to the ground. I'll just spend the last of my book money going to see Christian, Andrew, and Tristan in Romania or something, and then burn the account from there or something like that.
Yeah.
No, but actually, that's kind of what I like about the whole thing is like, I never wanted to be like a massive account.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of grew beyond what I was intentioned to be, because I started to get a lot of guys in on the jokes. A lot of guys think like, okay, Carl's funny, I'll follow him because, well, he's funny. And like I kind of don't want those guys around too much. I'd rather have like 15,000 followers who all buy my book and who all like my content, who all read all of it, as opposed to having 30,000 where like
They just
10%
like
doesn't
watching
buy
you
the
dance
book,
like a monkey.
5%, 5%, yeah, exactly. Like it's dancing monkey game all over again.
It always comes back to game at the end of the day.
But I think that's why it's so important as a fundamental to just build your game. Oh, that was my old RNG alarm kicking in.
Well, it's just that, and you know how people are always telling guys you got to read more philosophy, read more of the Bible, read more of this. Not one guy is telling people to read more stuff from this space. Like I have not seen, with the exception of you, me, and Rollo, anybody actually suggesting somebody read Ian Ironwood. Well, I guess Jack Napier, of course. Ian Ironwood, uh, Robert Glover, Manuel Smith. Who's some other authors I can think of here?
Well, Royce is obviously a big one.
Yeah.
And I like Black Dragon too. I mean, like, for all of it, he has faults. And I think that's kind of what I like about him with everything else. It's just the fact that he's open about his own failures and his own limitations.
Really? See, that's funny. I'm woefully undereducated on Black Dragon stuff. I've read like his main one where he talked about the statistics and how they don't really matter, but
Well, he has one of my favorite things about his perspective is that he actually says, like, it doesn't matter what other people think she is, if she's a 4, 5, 6, or 7. What matters is if you think she's attractive.
geez, masculine center of origin, or your masculine sense of, oh, for crying out loud, I'm stuttering this one. But yeah, your opinion's the only one that matters. It's funny how basic and profound a statement that is.
And I like that. I like the fact that he's open about the fact that, he has weight problems.
Mm-hmm.
And he has trouble with that because on one end, he does realize that it would increase his sexual market value to get if he lost weight. On the other hand, he's like, screw this. I'm an alpha male. I get laid anyway. I'm going to have this steak.
So a good enough level of fitness for him.
Well, that's kind of the thing that bothers me the most about this space is like, on one hand, people ignore the fundamentals. They don't recommend that people read other authors than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it's like this obsessive level of accomplishment. It's like, okay, you know what? If you're a fitness coach or you're a fitness model, I can see that you need to have like 10% body fat, be jacked and ripped. But if you don't have your body as a display window for what you do, then there is a good enough level of fitness that where no girl will disqualify you based on your lack of fitness.
Yeah. A quick shout out to Mick Inks here. Another $10 super chat. Thank you very much, brother.
So that's kind of my stance on it. It's like, and we talked about that on an earlier show, like the top 1% versus the top 10 or 20%.
Top 2% versus top 20%.
And I think that's kind of the issue because you get guys who are so convinced that the one area of this space they're good at is like the only one that matters. Like you have the trend boys with their physique, and it's like, oh, post your physique. You are not qualified to talk about the red pill unless you are 240 pounds, 10% body fat, and on trend.
You know how that's no different than the guy who says, I'm a good father, as the reason why women shouldn't divorce him or why they should be all over him? Like everybody always takes what they're good at and they assume that's the only thing you need to be good at. It's like a one-note song, and it's a very shallow person. Like have some depth. If you can't name 4 things about you that are outside of the norm, then you've probably got some things you got to work on. Because if all you got is fitness, then that's great. I'd love to have you around for when there's a war.
I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's like the necessity, making their necessity a virtue. It's the same thing as with the guys who find the red pill when they're married. And they're like, well, I could divorce her and go out and run game. Or the guy who's in his mother's basement right now screaming about obscure continental philosophy. He was like, well, I could go out and get laid now, but I'm just going to sit here instead. And I'm going to assume I could obtain the results. And then I'm just going to do whatever I like to do. And to be honest with you, philosophy is just like a commonly accepted, like smart person thing. In the end, if you're sitting in your basement all day reading philosophy, it's probably better than sitting in your basement playing Fortnite all day.
Marginally.
A lot. Because the whole thing, and that's kind of where I'm getting this whole thing, is like people say, like, I love classical music. And one of my favorite genres is classical music. It's perfect for working to.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, they're signaling by saying that I'm high status and I'm intelligent enough to understand this. And it's the same thing with the philosophy. It's like they're not reading the philosophy to actually learn from the author, or they're not reading Manister stuff to learn from the authors.
It's a signaling symbol, yeah.
It's a signaling thing, and they're not doing it to actually better themselves. They are actually doing it to tell other people and themselves, like, I'm smarter than you.
I read all this stuff just to flex. I think it makes sense, because I notice a lot of people who read philosophy and they make it known that they read philosophy, they can't articulate it. The same as how you're saying a lot of guys love talking theory, but they don't actually practice what they preach. I have never seen a guy who puts philosophy as his front thing. Oh, quick shout out here. Jim Tooley, thank you for the $15 super chat. I wish you guys would put a comment in there, because I'd love to give a shout out and answer any questions in that you have, but I'm more than happy just to thank you for your support to the channel. Oh yeah, so when they lead with the philosophy, they can't actually articulate it or put it into their own words. All they can do is quote it like it's scripture. Well, John 4:17 said blah 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 blah, or Nietzsche said blah 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 blah. I'm like, well, if you understood it, you would be able to put it in your own terms, and you wouldn't have to obscure it in language that was used 150 years ago that nobody really understands or uses today.
Yeah, and that kind of gets on my nerves too. When guys use words they obviously do not understand and they can't even define them.
Or
and they
spell them.
They use complex words to hide the fact that they have no content. Like,
yeah, it's obfuscation.
I don't really have a problem. I can say a sentence like, Ryan, your perspective is obviously anti-materialist, atheist, and anti-reason, because you are not following the doctrine that was espoused on page 124 of Karl Marx's Das Kapital. And I sound smart doing it. And for 90% of people, they're just going to assume, wow, he sounds smart. He's probably right. And who is this Ryan guy, and why is he wearing that goddamn shirt?
Hey, I wore this shirt for you. You guys gave me no feedback when I was out in Kensington Market looking, so I had to pick something up. I just took a chance. Figure fall colors are all the rage this summer. Oh, also back to Jim. I'm glad you're actually listening to this at the gym. Do we need to speed up the cadence there so you can get a good pump going on, or what?
And then we need to talk in like a 5x5 tempo.
Ooh, that'd be a good one. My favorite is the whatever Beastie Boys Sabotages. That's the cadence I love for workouts. And then for cardio, I love Cakes Going the Distance. Do you remember that song?
No, I don't.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. Anyways, enough with workout things there. Yeah, no, you're right. And it all stems from that same thing. And I've noticed this is like a law of the universe. I'm kind of trying to muddle through an article to get it all out, but it's a lot more work than I thought it would be. It's the complexity versus depth. Because a lot of guys assume that once they get into this thing, that it's a huge, complicated topic. And then after a month of reading, if they actually do read, they find that intersexual interactions are not really that complicated, but there's a lot of depth to them. And depth is hard, and depth requires dedication. It requires practice, and more often than not, it requires the experience and a lot of failure. What's easier, though, is to build complexity. Where, okay, so let's tack on, conservatism or politics or religion or philosophy and all these other things that don't matter. And so you have this nice wide depth or wide body of knowledge, but you barely understand any of it. But at dinner parties, you can tell great stories. Meanwhile, you take guys like you, where you had your one girl per week for the year. That was your goal there. So you've probably got a more nuanced and in-depth understanding of the dating market or just human interactions and psychology in general than any of those guys would. The problem is you have a chance of failing at that.
Yeah, the problem is also that I try as best as I can to give a reasonably realistic picture of what my life is actually like. That's why I tweeted out yesterday. It's like when people tell me like, Carl, you're a role model. And I'm like, well, I'm a guy in his mid-30s. I drink way too much. I go out decorating all the time. And I just got fined for indecent exposure last week for going too fast and too hard with the date I was on behind an old Blockbuster. Like, if I'm your
Did they
best
ask you to pay
model,
the fine at the station or right there on the spot?
No, he actually took me to the ATM and I had to get money out to pay the fine then and there.
Oh, that reminds me of Mexico, the days where they catch a sailor peeing behind a dumpster and like, sweet, I just got paid. Got to pay that fine now.
Yeah, it's like the thing is, like the reason I started writing and the reason I started a Twitter account was just I practice all of this stuff and I like to share my perspective on things and I like writing and I like sharing content. And of course, you know yourself that like those likes and those retweets are kind of addictive.
Oh yeah, I've actually had to turn most of them off and it's made a huge difference on my productivity.
Well, it's like a trade-off thing because like I muted some of our mutual DM chats there because, you know, it was just a bunch of guys LARPing over each other.
Oh yeah, talking about people like a bunch of gossipers. I was never a fan of that either. The fact that I never have to do it again is wonderful.
It is old, man. It is old.
Quick shout out to, are you kidding me? Shlomo Gold Scheckenbergel and Steen? All right, I'm happy in my mother's basement since I'm red-pilled and alpha not to practice game and lift weights. I got no problem filming my girl getting trained since I'm really red-pilled. I have a feeling that's a dig. The fact that guy paid 10 euros for it, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite thing about these guys is like when guys start paying you to actually take shots at you, how is that not a evidence that you're literally living in their head rent-free? Like it's like the guy who you had like back in the day who was like he paid like $100 for a consult just to record you being Canadian. And so it's like if guys are literally paying you to hate on you, how is that not a win? They're customers. It's like, bet you're a fan.
Yeah, you can't pick who your fans are. Oh, I mentioned it earlier too. You weren't here at the time though. Quincy, the guy we got intermittent fasting. I figured since we were talking about fundamentals, that it'd be awesome to have him on because he's a perfect example of the guy who just has to put in a modicum level of effort and start getting major successes. I got him on intermittent fasting and he's taught me more than I've taught him. I've never seen him online before, so this is going to be like a total surprise. Hope you don't mind. Wasn't sure if you were going to be able to make it today.
No, that's good. Well, I always make it. I'm just occasionally late. Do you have any idea how tired you are when you spend like 8 hours burning bridges?
Yeah, I know exactly what it's like. You think you're the first one who's been drinking for 16 hours a day, then had to be at work the next morning?
So,
half of my stories in my newsletter are me doing that.
Yeah, that was kind of it's never a good call when you head back home after 12 hours of drinking. You grab your late night food, you go home and you keep drinking.
I'm still surprised you can keep up like that. I can't, since once I stopped, it's one of those things you have to really practice. You can't, hey, oh geez, man.
Oh,
dude.
shit, we can see all that. It's the camera on. Hold on. Dad, shit.
What the hell?
Yeah, sorry about that, Holmes. We alive, baby. Damn. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. God damn.
Quincy, what is you doing, brother?
Man, listen. Okay.
And that
Yeah.
black dick flashed over the screen.
I hope not. I hope not.
There we go. Okay. All right. Much better. There we are.
Hey, you working right now, man?
Actually, no. I'm at a tuck shop until Monday. And I'm learning a good lesson. Call the receiver and find out what time they close before you get on the road. Because I was thinking
fair
they
enough.
closed. Yeah. I was driving yesterday. I thought they was going to close at 4 or 5 o'clock. They closed at 1:30. Couldn't make it in time, and they're closed on the weekends. What are you going to do?
Fair enough. So here, give everybody a little introduction. Like, who are you? Because a lot of guys don't know who you are.
All right. I am Quincy Johnson, formerly at Quincy Loves BBWs, until them bitches on Twitter got me out of here. I'm just a man, trying to live his best life, doing what he got to do to take care of his family. That's it. Real simple.
Yeah, hard working. Speaking of which, how's the fasting going? Because I remember when we started, you had, what was your original weight? It was 360 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. To be honest with you, my weight is pretty much the same. However, I have lost a ton of fat, and I'm built like a brick shit house. I put on a shit ton of muscle. You know what I'm saying? Like a fucking shit ton. I'm lifting shit that I didn't even think I could lift 6 months ago. Everything's
that's
good,
awesome.
man. Yeah.
Because I remember last I talked, you did that 7-day fast. You bought, was it 2 40-pound weight vests? And you've been just wearing them around, so you have constant like extra weight on you.
Correct. For about a good year and a half, I was wearing a 40-pound weight vest. I've got 2 20-pound bells and everything. With this new job I'm doing now, flatbed, I don't need none of that shit. Flatbed will work you the fuck out. Seriously.
Wow. Oh, really?
Yes. I had no idea, bro. It's way more than just driving a truck. Your ass is getting up on the flatbed, throwing up the tarps. The tarps themselves weigh about a good 150 pounds. You know what I mean? So you gotta throw that like 8 feet up in the air on top of the load, spread it out. It's a workout, B. A full
Dude, you
body
sound
workout.
like back when I was on the ranch and I used to have to fling hay bales around twice a year.
It's kind of like that, man. Seriously, it is kind of like that.
So yeah, Carl, you remember Quincy, right?
Oh, your weight loss is really impressive, man. I'm really impressed by that. So how much are you down so far?
Like I said, weight wise, it's weird. Like full disclosure, my weight has pretty much stayed in the same range, but my clothes feel looser. My stomach looks smaller. I'm definitely eating less. And like I said, I don't wiggle as much as I did a year ago. So something's happening. I just don't know what the fuck it is. But something's happening.
That's always a good sign when you slap the side of your stomach and it wiggles for 2.5 minutes instead of 3. That's always a step forward.
Indeed.
Well, hey, it took you years to put that stuff on. It's not going to come off overnight, right?
True that. I mean, yeah, I'll admit, yeah, I did spend 30 years effing up the body, so I know it's not going to take overnight to get it off. But hey, any progress is still progress. You know what I mean? Like I tell everybody, look, if you're gonna do something, at least as far as health is concerned, start and continue. Okay, it's not going to happen overnight. It may not even happen over a year. Keep going. Don't get discouraged. Keep going. Eventually, you're gonna get there. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the one thing too that was nice. You talked about how it was your weight isn't changing, but your body comp is. That's why I hate using the scale. I always like a measuring tape.
Man, I threw that shit away. I did. I threw that shit away, man. I was like, you know what? Fuck you, scale. Oh, bitch ass motherfucker. No. Look at it. I literally threw that shit in the trash and was like, you are not allowed in this household again. No. Hell no. You liar. Yeah, it's me, baby. It's me. It's Saturday. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to work. I'm chilling. So yeah, you getting the full cue on this thing here, man. Let's do some numbers and make history. Let's go.
Dude, that was my favorite part about you. Like, no matter how much people were beefing on each other, everybody stepping on everybody else's business, whatever, the only thing that everybody agreed on was that you doing fasting and making yourself better was awesome. Like, you were the single person that nobody could say an unkind word about, and the work you were putting in. So I found that you were almost inspiring in that way, as much as you always keep fluffing me.
Well, that's the thing. It's so rare in this space to have a guy and no one has a bad word to say about him, because like if you've been in the backstage of this space for a while, everyone is kind of talking shit on everyone.
Yeah.
And having someone and everyone's like, yeah, he's a cool dude and he's actually making progress and he's funny.
Yes,
Nothing bad to say about. Well, it's like just the biggest compliment you can get in this space is like, is no one has a bad word to say about you.
Mm-hmm.
Except, you know, the Trem Brigade. They always have a bad word to say about anyone.
Yeah. Screw them, man.
Yeah, plus you introduced me to Hotep. Like, I didn't really know what it was. I kind of knew Hotep Jesus a little bit, but only because of that Starbucks prank. But you actually introduced me to, like, the black version of what we're doing here, which I think is awesome. It's cool how well it's written out.
Shout out to all my brothers in the Hotep Nation. Shout out, you know what I'm saying, the Vibe High, Handy Mayhem, Dope Dudes. Yeah. We trying to do a few things, you know what I mean? I mean, it's a lot of people want to try to slander Hotep and say that we're misogynists or we're this. We're not. We're not. At the end of the day, we're just men and women, because believe it or not, there are a few female Hoteps out there. You know what I'm saying?
Middle-aged white women.
Get out of here! Get off the phone! Wow, y'all saw that. And I was like, Bob, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, you gonna have something on all hot and bothered, you know what I'm saying? Getting their freaking perms right, you know, and just, yeah. But it's like, all of this, we're just trying to be the best version of ourselves. First of all, we ain't no damn victims, never would be victims. Personal responsibility is top notch with us, okay?
Awesome.
That right there, like, we don't blame others for situations we put ourselves in, because there's always a choice. Good, bad, ugly, there's always a choice. Personal responsibility, not being a victim, and trying to be the best person you can be. That's it. You know,
it's funny how simple you can make it.
We don't have time to be victims. We're too busy working. You know?
Well, actually,
yeah,
that would be an interesting thing, because I never heard of Hotep, but I had this guy who's been following me like forever on Twitter, and I followed him back. His Twitter is like Lord Adonis or something. And he's he's a good dude, and he's been kind of educating me on Hotep there for a while. Like, and it seems like a very like red pill adjacent movement, because it's essentially just accepting that you have to live your own life, and you have to focus on the things that you can control. Like, you can control your weight, you can control how many girls you approach, you can control to some degree how much money you make. Focus on those things and stop focusing on how everyone is holding you back. Like, it's so easy to focus on everyone else and so hard to focus on yourself, because once you externalize that whole thing, I haven't.
Talk, motherfucker, talk.
And no, but my thing is, I have an upcoming essay on internal versus external locus of control, because a lot of the times what I notice is, and one of the reasons I'm actually a big fan of Tristan and Andrew Tate, is that they are what they are, but they are authentic with it. They're honest, like, about what they are and who they are, and that what they're doing to make money and what they're doing to keep control of their lives. And I think that's the focus all of us need to have is, okay, this is my life. I have to live here for 80 years. So of course I could always go and pull a Kurt Cobain, but why not make it as pleasurable as possible in everything you do?
Yeah. Well, that's why I like Quincy too, because if you think about it, like for me, it took me maybe 12 months to go from my lowest to where I am now. I don't know how long it took you, Carl, but probably that. Quincy's in it for the long haul. Like, it's going to take you probably 2-3 years after 30 years of letting yourself go. And
Shit, more than
it's
that,
gonna
bro.
taste, yeah, but it's gonna taste sweet for you because once you get where you want to be,
Mhm.
like it's like when you buy versus rent. Like you own your truck or do you rent your truck?
I actually rent the truck I'm driving for somebody.
Yeah.
However, I will be getting my own truck within the next 3 years. I'm speaking that shit into existence. You
And
know
I
what I
bet
mean?
you anything, you're gonna treat that truck you own way better than you treat this truck.
No, 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 my man. I
Oh,
I treat this truck now like it's my own because if you don't take care of the business will take care of you. So it's not like I'm out of, pissing on the floors or something like that, or having lot lizards up in it. No, 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 no. I do whatever I gotta do to keep Red Velvet running and running hard. Yes, I named my truck Red Velvet.
oh, you should have gone with Maximum Overdrive. Do you guys worship that? Like at Emilio Estevez, the Green Goblin truck?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I've never seen that movie. I've
What?
never seen. I know. I know. You know what? Since I'm off until Monday, I will watch it today. All right, promise you that. I'll watch it today, man. Going back to what old buddy Carl said, which hey, by the way, Carl, I hereby got the host up, man. You're doing a damn thing. It's like, yeah, you hit rock bottom, and when you get there, man, you gotta have a real long conversation with yourself. Like, all right, motherfucker, is this what you want? Is this what you want your life to be? If so, yeah, go ahead and take the Kurt Cobain route. But if it ain't, be it 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, get fucking better. My rock bottom was 2014 in May. Not gonna get into the details. Let's just say it was pretty fucking low. And I'm sitting there literally laying in a fucking ditch, bleeding the fuck out. I'm just like, you gotta do better than this, bro. You're almost 40. Do something. Like, come on, man. Like, I ain't saying you gotta be Bill Gates, but something's gotta be better than this. So as I pick myself up and my tooth, couple of days later, I had a heart to heart talk with a good friend of mine, and I never forget when we got to the Greyhound station in Colorado Springs. I looked at him, he looked at me, we started laughing. He was like, "When these days your black ass to get this shit right?" And like put me on the bus. And that was a sobering. Well, I say sobering. I was smoking weed all the way home, but anyway, I came up with a plan from Colorado Springs to Austin about where the fuck you gonna be at in 5 years. And the plan was real simple: focus on the money, fuck everything else. Like just that's it. I cut off all my old friends, you know what I'm saying? Worked my ass off, and just stayed away from all the bullshit. You know, cut out drinking. Not gonna lie, I was still, smoking a little weed and everything just to keep my sanity and whatnot about having to go back to Texas a third time with my tail between my legs. But as you can see, it paid off because now I'm not couch surfing. I'm not, what I'm saying, living check to check or day to day. I've got a career, not a job, and I have a family. I ain't saying this shit is easy. I'm just saying it can be done. And this is coming from somebody who, newsflash, is not the sharpest tool in the shed. I never got past the 8th grade. Okay, so if my ass can get out here and do it, what's everybody else's excuse? I'm not trying to hear it. Some of y'all bitches got fucking degrees and whatnot, talking about you struggling. You're not struggling, you're just making dumbass decisions, man. Smarten the fuck up. I'm sorry, I'm over here cussing and yelling, excited, I'm hyped, you know what I'm saying, with the big homie and everything. Like, let's fucking get into it, man. Like, it kills me when people say, "Oh man, I can't do something because this happened." Just shut up. Shut up, man. No, 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 no. One thing I have found about anybody, from Bill Gates to the motherfucker singing to a fish in a pond somewhere, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way to do it. Point, period, full fucking stop. If you don't, any excuse to the world will talk you out of it. So it basically comes down to how much do you want it? How bad do you want it? That's it.
Man, that's awesome. So, hey, I hate to ask, but I'm going to let you go for a bit here. We're going to have you back on. You don't mind coming back too when I send you an invite,
Damn,
Matt? I don't know what your
I got
schedule's
kicked off
like. So,
already. Shit, I got kicked off already.
no, man.
Did I freaking go too deep down the freaking rabbit hole? My bad.
No, you did exactly what we were talking about here. Just like the basic stuff, people handling the basic fundamentals in that. Corey's back in, so we're going to switch bar. I'm trying to get this switched up where we have like a bunch of people coming in.
Can I say one thing to Quincy before he jumps off? I mean, good on you, man. I mean, you seem like a good dude, and you're exactly the kind of guy I write for, because you're a guy, you're trying to make it better. You're a real dude who's honest about the fact that he's not perfect, and he's starting from wherever you are and just trying to get better every day. So I have a lot of respect for you. This is the first time we met, but you're exactly the kind of guy who a lot of these guys should be trying to be, rather than take podcast off.
Yeah, mad respect for you, man. I love you, brother.
I appreciate y'all, man. Yeah, go ahead and do what you do. Holla back at me, all right?
Well, hey, before you do, give your @ so people can follow you on Twitter. Follow your path, man.
It is at Cursed Fudd, CURSED Cursed Fudd. That's my new account, because the old one, like you said, I got kicked off for one of my weakest tweets ever. I was just like, of all the bullshit I've said, this is what did it, huh? Really? This is what did it? This is like, you know what I'm saying? This is like a motherfucker going out shooting 35 people, but then getting arrested for jaywalking. Like, really?
It's like OJ.
Hey, I'm gonna say this though. OJ is the motherfucking OG. This motherfucker never snitched, never bitched, never read it. Man, just shut the fuck up and did his time. I gotta respect that. You know what I'm saying? I gotta respect that. You know, now that he's on Twitter, I follow him. I want to hear what the fuck he has to say. You know what I'm saying? Because like him or not, he did it how you supposed to do it. Not like, you know, killing people, just like he was in the game and he didn't rap. He didn't snitch. He didn't bitch and moan. Man, just shut up and did his time. For that, I salute him. And now he's out trying to do something past that.
Oh, he's out and he's doing things again?
Dude, he's on Twitter.
That's awesome.
He's on Twitter. He just put out a video. He's on Twitter.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. So, hey, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again soon, man. Everybody, like I said, follow Cursed Fudd. Well worth it.
Thanks, man.
All right, later, dude.
Later, man.
Later, man.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was quick.
Man, Quincy's hilarious. Swears a bit too much, but that's awesome.
Yeah, he seems like exactly the kind of guy who's just trying to improve his life. And I think a lot of guys would be better off if they were going in that route, because everyone here started at the bottom of somewhere, and everyone should just be focused on getting better. And I love the fact that guys are, instead of focusing on what's wrong, they're just working on what they can control and what they can fix. I can't hear you, Ryan. You're talking, but your mouth is moving, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Yeah, and that's the part too. It's realistic goals. Like, he's not expecting to be Denzel Washington with six-pack abs and thoughts hanging off of him all day and all, but he's like, he knows what better would look like. I wish more incels actually had that idea where they're like, well, what's the point? If I'm never going to be banging supermodels, why should I even bother lifting a weight? It's like, well, going from a 4 to a 6 is going to make your life infinitely better.
Yeah, it's just, I think a lot of guys are they're too focused on that idealized life. Like, everyone here is a real guy.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone here is living. Well, I wouldn't say I'm too real. I'm.
Oh, I meant Quincy.
Yeah, that was a moment there where I was kind of concerned that this would turn into an episode of Blacked.
Yeah, it took me for surprise there. But that's fine. That's his first time on camera. It happens with everybody.
Yeah, that's why I don't have a camera attached to this computer. I wouldn't accidentally want them to catch on to me doing an MLD style podcast in my bathrobe.
Oh man. But yeah, and it's not even just us. Like you're right. Hotep is kind of starting their own thing. And when you read their little, I don't know who put it up, but they have like a Hotep set of commandments and it reads almost identical to ours. The only thing it's got that we don't is they kind of go a little harder in the anti-pet minority route, which I can see them having kind of like a unique problem that maybe a guy from Canada and another one from Europe may not have. So,
Yeah,
well, yeah, it's like
I mean,
multiple
like
different
I said,
places converging.
well, it's like one of the first guys who ever followed me on Twitter was this guy called Lord Adonis or something like that, and he's been Hotep since way back, and he was kind of the guy who told me about it. And I think it's a good movement and just focused on that internal locus of control, like what can you control?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what bothered me about a lot of things. And it moves away from the fundamentals when guys start talking ideology or politics or philosophy. It's a way to build a wall between them and action.
Yeah.
Because
no, and it's painfully obvious too to everybody else.
Yeah. And that's kind of my issue with it is, well, that's my biggest problem. It's not painfully obvious. It's painfully obvious to you and me. It's painfully obvious to a couple of the other switched on guys in the sphere. It's not obvious to a lot of the guys entering the sphere because they it's kind of like I used the expression, the male version of Instagram ass models at one point.
Yeah.
And the whole point behind that analogy is that they're guys who are essentially, they're not contributing anything. They have this image that they're putting up, and guys like the image, but they don't understand the guy. And like a guy like Quincy, if you start off at 300, 400, 500 pounds, a realistic weight loss goal is 50 to 100 pounds a year. You can probably do more if you're 500 in your first year, but overall, through that whole weight loss thing, you're going to lose 1 to 2 pounds every month if you're on point with everything.
And that's not counting the fact that he's going to be putting on muscle because he's going to be getting stronger too. And it's one of the things as a very heavy person you can do. You can cut and bulk at the same time because you just have so much of an excess in calories. Oh, quick shout out, One Man's Way. Holy jeez, $100 US super chat. I told my woman I didn't want her hanging out with guy friends in person, and she respected that. And the next 2 days, she is cold and everything is my fault. She wanted a week not to talk to each other and analyze if we should still get married. You mind cutting this one off and answering this? I got an answer too, but I want to hear you first, Carl.
Well, she's basically, I'm hesitant to call it a shit test, but what she's doing is she's pulling away her affection. You can fall into her frame. And my approach to this would be the simple thing of just don't play into it. Just do your thing. Focus on, building, what's the MLD line? Make money, make muscle, learn game. Focus on those three and let her come to you.
See, that's kind of similar then to mine. So I have more of a nuanced thing. And it's, again, I wish if Rollo was here, he'd link his Girls Night Out article. But as soon as you start telling a girl what to do, her instant response is to fight you on it. And so I find a much better way is a boundary enforcement, because that's essentially what this is. You don't want your girl hanging out with guys alone because you don't want isolation, because we all know that eventually you put two people into a cage and turn the lights out and things happen. The thing is, though, and this is something I've learned early on, you can't change people. People are going to do what people do, and there's nothing you can do to change that. What you can change is how you react to it. And so first things first, you get your foundations in place. If you lost her, how long would it take for you to replace her? And if the answer to that is less than a reasonable amount of time, let's say a month, 30 days, 2 weeks, whatever, then you got to work on that stuff, because whatever boundaries you try to enforce are going to be flaccid anyway. Also, once you get to that point, it's a test. It's a boundary test. And so this is where you would say something similar to, no girl I date hangs out with guy friends alone. Now, this is different. Obviously, we're not talking about, yeah, it's my boss. We're at a work function and there's going to be a bunch of us there. We're talking about, yeah, my boss and I are going to be sharing a hotel at this conference in Las Vegas. Like, you trust your instinct when you realize something seems a little fishy. And you just say flat out, like, no girl I'm dating does this stuff. And then the onus is on her. She can either do that, at which point she's called your bluff and you have to follow through, or she realizes that she's going to lose a high value man if she doesn't enforce his, or if she crosses his boundaries, and then she starts acting right. And that's it. Like Tate even brought that up, where he gives a girl one chance. It's like he will viciously eject a girl from his life. And as much as people don't like the idea of being like a cam pimp on the internet, that's kind of the mentality you have to have.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's one of those things that it's all about what you will allow. Like a psychologist I used to read a lot from used to say that drama is a vampire. You don't get any in your life unless you invite it into your house. And that's kind of the thing I'm getting at with this is like a lot of you guys are too eager to invite people into your house, but none of you are eager to kick anyone out of your house. And I think the red pill Reddit, and I just thought of this was not intentional, but it's kind of like the perfect analogy for it.
Right.
Because when you invite everyone in, but you never kick anyone out, unless, you know, hey, Jess. Because when you invite everyone in.
Oh, you got to mute your YouTube, buddy. Yeah, buddy. Oh, you were saying when you invite everyone in.
Yeah, what I'm saying is when you invite everyone in and you don't really want to kick anyone out, all you end up with is like an 80s house party where everyone is trashing your parents' place, and the police end up showing up and throwing everyone out for you. And that's kind of it's a perfect analogy for the red pill Reddit, really, because, you know, they invite everyone in, they never kick anyone out. They may take your tag away if you call the head mod of the subreddit a pussy who can't make a call in public to 30,000 followers.
Jeez.
But that's what's required to have them actually take the call and say, hey, they're not like, hey, buddy, we're kicking you out. They're like, buddy, I'm not going to be a friend. You can still stay around and trash my parents' house, but just don't say I'm your friend.
Fair enough. So, hey, Corey, how's the week been treating you here? Things have calmed down. Everybody's trying to get focused now on the fundamentals.
Yeah, everybody but Carl, who's setting bridges to every useless contact he has in the space. But other than that, it's been calming down. Yeah, just first day of no school for the kids, so trying to get them squared away. And but otherwise, just a normal late spring week here in the old Midwest. But the space is interesting. Hey, Conk, I'm an EY, not an RY. I'm not one of those heathens. So now you know.
Well, hey, so you have been around at least as long as me, and you were there when we both kind of started. From the married perspective, so you see Quincy talking about like the black experience in this, Carl's talking about his personal experience with this. I know you and I've got a ton of stories we can go back to on the same mistakes that the married guys make when they first decide to enter this space and sort out their lives here. And I was trying to think, did I want to mention Alpha as Wolf or the guy with the golden picture frame, or what archetype do you think would probably be the most common one that guys do that they screw up before they even start?
I'd say Steve McQueen Light is more of the archetype that people screw up most. I don't think that there's a huge amount of binary Billy weirdness problems with having to deal with the assimilation of information. You know that in a lot of instances there are two types of guys. There's the implement everything all at once. We like to call him Rambo. And then there's the the pensive guy who suffers from paralysis of analysis, who learns everything through all the sidebar reading and likes to read everybody else's stories but doesn't implement anything. I think
that's the major guy in this space, because I get the feeling that a lot of the ladder type guys then move on to trying to create content, and that those are the same guys. I'm not sure if you were around back in the pickup days.
Well, I would have been around in the pickup days, in the very, very nascent time, when people thought that negging was novel. I got married at 25, and I'm 44 now. So that tells you that, as far as learning game and implementing it, that was more between the ages of 19 and 24, when I was on the prowl, as opposed to some of the later stuff, or any of the Neil Strauss, or any of the stuff that was kind of developed in the 2000s to take into consideration technology changes. All of my pulls and pickups and conquests were, IRL, face-to-face, walking up to sets, either with or without other dudes. It was never I'm online, I'm going to swipe in a direction, and let's meet up and Netflix and chill. I was never part of that dynamic.
No, the reason I asked is just one of those guys I remember very good from those days was the guy who would never post any field reports, but they would read all the literature, and they could post like massive, complicated routines. And from a practitioner perspective, you could see, okay, this would never work, not because it's probably not effective, but just on the level of, you couldn't remember all of this when you're 3 drinks in at a bar, trying to hit on a girl. It's like a 17-point checklist you have to go through to pick a girl up, and simple is much more effective. That's why I liked when someone asked Donovan his opener, and he was like, hey, I'm Donovan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a much more effective method than trying to create some scenario in your mind that will, one size fit all situations. All women will succumb to the beauty of your plan and the precise placement of your words, and that, my mind has generated something so erotic and so fail-safe that it's a killer. But then you actually try to apply it in practice, and she asks you 5 or 6 questions in the middle of your spiel that doesn't match up with what you're trying to produce, and you have to go off script. Well, then Binary Billy there, or Autistic Andy, can't get out of his own way fast enough to try and fail to pick that girl up, because he doesn't know what to say, because he's been working on a routine for so long that he doesn't know how to banter in the moment.
Yeah, same thing with Damaged Daniel. It's very hard when the only thing you have is to go on about philosophy.
Well, yeah. And a lot of times, too, these guys, if they have had some experience with other people, they might immediately tail off into either, experiences that they've had, and sometimes people just don't want to hear it. I mean, I don't want to hear about all of your Chilean vacations if I'm a new girl and you're trying to pick me up just outside of Planet Fitness. And if that works out for him by, having that frame of reference, then great. But trying to woo someone then, if your own personal story isn't interesting enough, with, tales of, Wittgenstein, or trying to reconcile why, Nietzsche said that God is dead. I'm not really sure, what someone with a yoga mat under her arm is going to be impressed with at that point in time. But, I guess you do you.
Well, that's the thing that I liked about it, was storytelling. Whoa, that got really loud all of a sudden. Does that sound louder to you?
No.
All right. Anyways, yeah, well, the whole point of these canned routines, and anybody who ever read Mystery Method, they knew it wasn't about copying them exactly. Mystery just knew he had to show these guys who are overly literal how a story works. And anybody who became successful, I think Weak and Sensitive used to have a layer back in the two. But you learn how to tell a story. And then once you can tell a story, you tell your stories. And then you learn that it's not just about telling a story to make yourself feel better. You're telling a story to entertain somebody else to get that initial rapport between you. And that's when you learn that, like you said, you can't just tell a story about how great you are because the other person doesn't care. Everybody else is worried about value for themselves. Like, what do you do that would add value to my life? And if you can't answer that question because you're too busy telling everybody how great you are, then they're just going to lose interest. They're just like, it's a braggart and I don't really care. Or worst case scenario, you make the other person feel insecure about something about themselves and then they get hostile towards you. But that's why I liked, the mystery was good, but people took it too literally. Same as everything. Once you take it literally, you kind of miss the point.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes girls aren't used to banter either. And if the first thing you do is tell her that your shoes look like shit, maybe that might, put her on her heels immediately. I mean, you can't just walk straight into anything and expect canned knowledge that you gain from the books to immediately be turned into wisdom because you haven't applied anything. And if you don't know the difference between the two, that just means that you haven't had the experience to apply your learning at that point in time.
I agree. Anyway, shout out to One Man's Way. Thank you for the $20 super chat. I'm a Marine combat vet. I'd say thanks for your service, but it's not my country, but it's thanks for joining up. I always liked working with you guys. Is going to community colleges for the free market of plate spinning a bad idea regarding #MeToo? I've heard mixed things from it, but I'm a little bit outside. The last time I did college was before Me Too became a thing. So I'm a little bit.
My whole thing with the Me Too movement, it's kind of like the issue I have with, you have to fight the last minute resistance guys. I've hit on probably close to 300 women in colleges and in workplaces that are not my own in the past couple of months. And for the most part, as long as you're calibrated, it's cool. The biggest issue is when a guy who's uncalibrated runs in and starts getting creepy. And the thing is, I never understood what girls meant when they called a guy creepy until I was at a shopping mall. And I was walking between two stores and I made eye contact with one of these salespeople that hang out between the stores. Mm-hmm. And, let's just say that you don't need a good gaydar to see that what team this guy was playing for. And so I was like, shit, I made eye contact. He came up to me and he's like, do you have a minute? And me being polite, I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. What's up? And he's like, well, I'm trying to sell this nail polish thing. Can I demonstrate it for a second? And I was like, okay, whatever. So he takes my hand and he starts kind of rubbing one of my nails with like this stone thing. And he's holding hard eye contact while doing this. And he's like, what I'm doing now is I'm scraping off all the residual stuff on the top of your nail. This will make it easier for your nail to get oxygen. And then he drips this oil on and he starts rubbing it into my nail. And he's like, and now what I'm doing with this oil, I'm revitalizing your nail so it'll be nice. And then he showed me like, oh, look at how good that nail looks compared to all your other nails. I'm like, hey man, thanks, but I'm way too pretty of a man already. If I start doing my nails, I'm crossing a line that I'm not really comfortable crossing. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I have to do this. It's my job. And then he squirts lotion all over my hand and starts giving me a hand massage in the middle of a mall while keeping hard eye contact. Oh. And at that point, I realized what girls meant when they say a guy is creepy.
Yeah. I don't even know what to add to that story.
So unless you're the dude giving girls hand massages in the middle of the mall, you're probably good. Like, don't worry too much about Me Too. It's not going to be an issue unless you're very, very uncalibrated and you're very, very creepy.
Yeah, don't be the creepy Marine in the quad is basically what Carl is saying. I mean, every college campus has some archetype of some guy who has non-calibrated, or I guess what you would call single note game. There's the turd who hangs out under the tree and plays his guitar and drags in those four idiots who have never seen anyone play a guitar before. But you have to find your spots, you have to find your place, and you have to make enough approaches to make it worth your while. But at the same time, be smart about it. If it's somebody in class who's shown interest, then yeah, great. If it's somebody that you're just meeting, out, and you find them attractive, use caution. But at the same time, this is the only way you learn. So you got to try to put yourself out there.
Well, the thing is,
for me, I was like building social networks. The idea was you get pre-selection. So usually the first, and then military was the same way, and same when I was in college. Just the first 10 girls I met, I just tried to make them into acquaintances. And then from those acquaintances, then you branch out from there. But I guess that's social circle game. I don't know if that's what he's aiming for here.
well, one of the things I run into is that when you work for I have a very strict, don't shit where you eat rule. So I never hit on girls I work with. But if you work for a company with what I did for a couple of years, I was working for a company with 10,000 employees. At that point, it's so big that you can meet a girl out in public and it turns out, oh, she works for the same company. And it's a hard thing to navigate, but it has to do with scope and scale. If it's a huge company, it's probably not going to be a big deal. And to be honest, most girls are not going to file HR complaints on you unless you really, really piss them off.
Or embarrass them.
And that,
if you embarrass them, they will burn you.
Yeah, and that's generally based off from a guy generally not being able to take no for an answer. They have it built up in their mind that either their spiel is foolproof or they've taken certain cues incorrectly or too far, and then once rejected, they'll personally attack the girl. But again, that's a personal interaction problem with people who generally don't have enough time spent outside of the basement. That isn't the norm. And like Carl says, most people are reasonable, even women, believe it or not. So if you have something to say or somebody to talk to, and they're generally interested in what you have to discuss, then turn it into a date later on, or go get some coffee, or do something in a safe public place where everybody can just kind of tell each other their story. That's it. It's really not that hard.
Well, it's as hard as you want to make it. I don't mean to jump back, but I was looking back at One Man Way's super chant, and I realized we kind of ignored your second half of your thing. She wanted a week not to talk to each other and analyze if we should still get married. This reminds me a lot of those. Do you know when a lot of guys had those stories, Corey, where they would get married, the sex would be great. As soon as that first kid came, completely dried out, turned into a dead bedroom, and the girl basically just hated him after that because she got what she wanted.
Yeah, I think that woman wanting to control the narrative as to how you're going to be treated and how you're going to treat each other. I mean, this is a major shit test, especially if it's right before marriage and she wants to go off on her own and make some decisions on why or why not you might not want to get married. She's looking for you to run back to her and start giving her reasons why you should, and backpedaling on your position over one argument. If you marry this person, you're going to have that argument over much more major issues than her ability to hang out with other dudes. It's boundary enforcement at this point. I mean, if you're the type of person who says, yeah, my wife can hang out with all the dudes she wants whenever she wants,
she may not cheat that time, but it does set her up in the future if she wants to have plausible deniability.
Yeah, I mean, in the Married Red Pill, I mean, the line was always, if you have that as a boundary, all you say to her one time is, my wife, or in this case, my future wife, doesn't hang out with men without me present. Simple. She doesn't go on dates or group dates with other guys. I mean, it sounds, pretty reasonable to me, and it sounds reasonable to most people who want to be in committed monogamous relationships. The only people it doesn't sound reasonable to are people who either aren't secure in their decision to get married at this point, or people who feel as though that marriage is for cash and prizes and that the vows are only a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from my perspective, this is very easy. She got to earn your name.
Well, that's the thing too. Yeah, like that's what got me thinking about it. Because the way, and no offense to you, one man's army, but the way you're referring to it is you're not sure what to do here. And the problem with that is that she can drive a truck. She'll wedge through that insecurity. I can't think of a better way to describe it, but I think insecurity is a good word. Like the fact that you're not treating yourself as the prize here, I think is the real issue. And honestly, in your position, I would essentially just nuke the entire thing. At this point, she's already shown that she doesn't want to get married to you, at least not in the way that you want. And considering you're giving up everything in this point, and she's gaining everything in this point, I would honestly start looking for a replacement. It's on her at this point to make amends. The dog's chewing with the chew toy in the background here, so it's taking away all the gravity from this. But
yeah, I'm with Ryan on this one. It's just one of those cases where the girl is already frame testing, and she wants you to run back so she knows she's in complete control. If you run back to her, that's just going to give her the entire power base of the relationship forever. And on a side note here, what the hell do I have to do to lose followers? My new follower requests are actually outpacing my unfollows. And I even blocked like 10 idiots today. Like, what do I have to... I feel like fricking, what's his name? Stone Cold Steve Austin here. All I'm trying to do is be a heel, but everyone loves me. What's wrong with people?
you're honest. That's the problem. It was something that happened back when I was still on Reddit, is that every time a hit piece would come out, they would call all of us everything, misogynists, Nazis, and all they worry about is getting laid. And the worst part is, I think it works. And then the audience reading that, all they would see is, wait a minute, these guys are getting laid and it works? I got to go check out. It can't be as bad as they think. And then they come in there and they find guys just being very honest about stuff that they never heard elsewhere. Like, I guarantee you, if you really want to lose followers, what you need to do right now is start revolving to a purple attitude and telling guys to man up and marry smart.
Yeah, and find the quality woman TM. Find everything that Taylor Burrows writes and just write the exact same thing, but just switch out some of the pronouns.
There's a good topic for you guys too. So, we're obviously not for the guys who say you have to be as good as Jesus if you want to talk about the Bible. Like, we get that. If you don't lift, have six-pack abs, make 7 figures a year, if you don't have 19-year-olds jumping off of your dick all the time, you're basically not worth listening to.
You forgot.
But then on the other side, you have, in this case, a woman in her late 30s, I think it is, never been married, never settled down, didn't really have a relationship, giving relationship advice. It's interesting how, like, both extreme ends of that are really unpalatable messages.
Well,
just wondering where that line gets drawn.
It's like the reason why I gave Rich that line with, the one-eyed men leading the blind, is that a lot of the time I feel that that's the case here, because even like with pickup literature, I never experienced a lot of last-minute resistance.
Same.
And if like 3 chapters of your book is dedicated to handling last-minute resistance, you're doing something wrong in the earlier thing. And for me, it's more about being honest about guys with what they can end up with. And if you're getting like a lot of last-minute resistance, the girl obviously isn't really keen on sleeping with you. So I think that's counterproductive. Like, if you get to that point and you get a lot of LMR, just eject from that, kick her out of your place and, go back to drinking and calling shot callers within the Manosphere pussies. Like a real man.
Well, I was thinking about that because I always joke about how, since this is a praxeology, it doesn't matter what's true, it's just what's useful. And I remember, at least from Mystery, I didn't read a lot of the other stuff out there, but when LMR came, the idea was a freeze out. de-escalate, go back, do something else more casual, and then try again later if you can build up any more sexual tension. But that's kind of what you described, but the way you described it is true. I find the way Mystery described it was useful, because a guy who's so hell-bent on investing all this time into something and not getting what he wants at the end, him thinking of it as another strategy actually helps him. So in this case, he did the exact same thing you did, but they call it a freeze out. And then it seems like a tactic where you haven't quite given up yet. But then again, I guess it's one of those things that if you take it literally, it definitely does look more manipulative than it is, when in reality, it's just a way to lie to yourself so you stop being so creepy and massaging her hands.
Well, to be fair, Ryan, I mean, we don't have that problem in our space with guys taking things way too literally.
That's true. I don't know, man. I think you missed your career in comedy. Could have had you on Your Mom's Basement podcast telling all these kind of jokes.
Yeah, well, the whole thing with that is I could do at least 45, like if I was still doing stand-up, I could do a 45-minute set just on guys in the manosphere who are like, they're overweight, they're approaching broke, they married a single mom, and they're telling guys how to handle their relationships with women. That's like being the guy who just spent 11 years in prison for fraud, telling guys how to run their accounting practice.
Fair point. Well, Corey, then, question for you. So you're obviously a more well-read guy too, same as Carl. Who do you think, let's put Rollo and Robert Glover out of this one. Who would be the first guy? Oh, and Manuel Smith. We'll take all three of those guys out. Who would be the top three guys you'd recommend for people to understand this space and gain more depth?
To gain more depth, three people in the space that I would recommend. Are you talking about books, or are we talking about actual people to follow on certain mediums?
Let's go either or.
Okay, well, the oldie but goodie book that I believe everybody should still read is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Carnegie is old, it's antiquated, but at the same time, it most certainly adds to what I think most people lack is assertiveness. You need to know that. I would also recommend people read and not take literally the 48 Laws of Power. Those also need to be understood as far as how people will try and manipulate one another, where I guess advantages might be able to be gained. And I like Rich Cooper too, because of his saliency of points, and also because he's a proven commodity. Again, this is one of those instances, if you want to follow people who you might want to trade lives with, at least, stick to somebody who has a certain perspective regarding what it is that they want to learn and what they want to know. I'm not going to fluff up anybody in this particular discussion because that's just not the way I operate. But at the same time, if you don't think you can trade places with the person that's giving you advice, I don't know if I would use that as a personal example of who to attain to be. But again, the books are a lot easier in that regard because you can apply them to yourself, but at the same time, you also don't know necessarily how to calibrate based off from that. So that's why you need those personal examples of people who appear to be applying things correctly.
Good point. What do you think, Carl? What would be your top three?
Well, you just have to read Evola, man, especially chapter 4 of Ride the Tiger and his criticism of the American lifestyle. I mean, if you haven't read that, sorry, I can't keep a serious face with that, but Corey mentioned How to Win Friends and Influence People. I like the converse one, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. But I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is a good book just on the basis of, it's a good narrative, and it's also a good story about, how your frame kind of determines everything. Because the main difference between rich dad and poor dad is not in results, it's so much as it's in perspective on how they view money. And I think that's the issue with a lot of guys in the space. Like, if you view earning money as something negative, like poor dad, he views making money as being exploitive by default. Like, if you view flirting with girls, meeting women, etc., as degenerate behavior de facto, then you're never going to be all that successful. And it reminds me of these married guys, and you tell them, well, how about flirting with the cute cashier at the grocery store just to kind of keep your game sharp? And they're like, oh, I can't do that. That's cheating. And it just keeps guys from getting into practice. I'm also a big fan of 48 Laws of Power, and I would also read The Prince by Machiavelli. That's one of my favorite all-time books. And let's see, what else? There's a book called The Thinking Doing Gap. I can't remember who wrote it, but I think it's very relevant to guys in this space about taking your thoughts and making them into action. I think that's maybe the major bridge a lot of guys have to cross. It's kind of their Rubicon to go from, the basement to, just talking to a girl or going to the gym or whatever. Because that bridge between thinking and acting, that's a pretty long journey to take. And it took me a while to do that myself, just on the basis that it's easy, safe, and comfortable, especially if you're kind of an intellectual guy, to just stay there reading philosophy, reading books, talking about books, discussing things online. That's easy, but actually implementing what you talk about is difficult. And I think that's one of the things that we don't get enough attention on in this space. Is a lot of the stuff I write, a lot of the stuff like Rollo writes, that's a degree of abstraction. You get principles and heuristics from it, but they don't work like laws of nature. So I think just reading things that teaches you that level of intellectual discernment, in that you can say that, okay, this is a heuristic, this is a universal law, this is a principle, this is an axiom, this is a premise, and knowing all those different levels and things. And I would recommend any book that deals with research methods from an academic perspective. And the only reason I'd recommend that is because a lot of guys have this, well, one thing science does very well is try to separate out ethos and pathos from what you're trying to figure out and do. And by applying that same line of thinking to what you're trying to do with your life, you will naturally become more red-pilled, in that you will see reality more clearly, because it's so incredibly easy to lie to yourself and delude yourself. And I find that's the biggest issue. That was a tangent, so sorry for going off on a bit of a rant there.
No, it's fine. It's good. I wanted to fill the last 10 minutes before we go at 11 here. But you guys, you're making it tough on me, which is awesome. I actually had to think really hard about 3 that you hadn't mentioned yet, and I think I got them. First one, I would say from Dr. Buss there, Why Women Have Sex. He basically laid out in a narrative format a study where they asked, I think it was like 50,000 women about the reasons they have sex, and he has a bunch of different field reports essentially about this. And I think any guy who still has delusions about female sexuality, it would do him a huge service to be able to read that one and understand it. Second one, and I'm obviously focusing more on this space for this, but Manosphere by Ian Ironwood. I think that's probably the one best history book of the Manosphere from 1980 on. And he goes over everything. He goes over purarchy, he goes over red pill, he goes over MRAs, everything. And it's something I've noticed after spending some time with Rollo, is that everything that happens here, everybody thinks this is new beef or that, but he's noticed, like, yeah, this is the same thing that happened. Like every beef, oh, it's the same time that happened in 2004 with, Whippity Splash, or, oh yeah, this happened in 96 with this person and this person. It's one of those, if we're doomed to repeat history if we don't read it. And for the third one, I'm up in the air. It's going to be Venkatesh Rao, but I don't know if I want to recommend Tempo or Be Slightly Evil better. I would say Tempo because it helps you understand how to think by using OODA loops as the reference model. So instead of thinking as decisions being just input and output thing, you think of them along the lines of narratives. And I think that's been the most helpful thing for anybody who reads praxeology and doesn't use the words red pill truth unironically. Is that you learn that everything will have a certain seriousness to it, like on a positive negative scale. Is this helpful? Does this hinder? And then the strength of it, like, do I feel more passionate about this or less? And then as you kind of map that, you can start to see what things affect you. Like if something makes you fly off the handle, you're actually able to identify, oh, so it's as soon as somebody hits this trigger point, and it allows you to get control of your own thought processes. But then again, Be Slightly Evil is good too. Because while 48 Laws of Power, you guys notice it always uses flowery language and it talks about kings and knights and all this masculine like warfare references. Be Slightly Evil, he handles it on a much more practical day-to-day level. Like he mentioned, you guys know when you're walking down the street and if somebody's walking towards you and then you do that little dance to see who gets out of the way? He actually applies like, so what would a sociopath do in this situation and why? And his example I think he used was you just slow down and continue to walk straight ahead and then the other guy will dance around you. And it was like a great little example there of like a small way to establish frame in like a meaningless context without being overbearing or a gamma male about it. So I think those would be the three. And then a short fourth place one too. And it's actually the one I got in college there. Funny enough, the author of it, Anthony J. Johnson, A Basic History of Art. It is neat how many of
something made by Anthony Johnson. I'm not sure if I can stay on the show now.
No, I think it's Jansen with an A. I just figured it'd be funnier to say it that way. But it's nice because he kind of addresses art as visual philosophy. And if you're really going to get into philosophy, at least there, it allows you to have some stories if you want to run game in a museum without having to read, 500 pages of God knows who.
Well, one book I would recommend that I didn't mention is Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy.
God.
That's always a go-to for me. The thing is, I've been shit-talking philosophy for like 3 months on my Twitter feed now. And the whole reason for it is like so many guys use it as a crutch to avoid actually acting. But one of the reasons why I would recommend reading Dr. Russell's book is that it will give you that solid foundation within philosophy so that when someone starts spouting off words like materialist, atheist, capitalist, whatever, you actually know those words, what they mean, and how to see through them. Because I think that's kind of like my biggest damage in this space is that I've read so freaking much that I can kind of see through the whole thing. And, a lot of the guys, you both saw Good Will Hunting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That how you like them apples scene.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I feel about a lot of guys in this space. Like they've never read philosophy before. They end up starting with Nietzsche, because Nietzsche, for all his flaws, is really appealing to someone who's never read philosophy before. And that kind of colors their entry point into philosophy in a way where they love that whole high-level, intellectual, extremely abstract stuff. When in reality, I think Aristotle had perhaps the most important book, bar the ones on epistemology.
Metaphor of the cave and such. Yeah, I mean, anybody who actually studied philosophy as a major or a minor in college starts with Plato. It starts with Socrates and Plato, and then moves on to Aristotelian means. I mean, you start with the Greeks for a reason.
Yeah, that's my whole thing, because that's why I kind of want to go off and be really, really offensive and curse a lot now when I talk about the whole virtue side of the sphere. Because if you actually read Nicomachean Ethics, which was pretty much the baseline for virtue ethics, what it deals with is exactly what some of us advocate. It's the midpoint between a vice and a virtue. So being humble is good, but you don't want to be a pussy. Being direct, clear, and having your boundaries is good, but being conflict seeking is not. And that's kind of my main takeaway from that book. And with the whole virtue thing, it's not a Greek version of virtue, it's a Jesus sphere version of virtue. And it's one of those, like, the meek shall inherit the earth. No, they fucking won't.
No, and
the meek are attending a convention and having their wife banged by another dude right now.
yeah, I mean, Aristotle basically boiled down virtue in Nicomachean Ethics as calibration is virtue, not Jesus's virtue, or that a certain religion is virtuous, or that certain behavior is necessarily more virtuous than another. It's finding the middle between two extremes of behavior. If you can describe any type of behavior with two extremes, and there's a third description that falls on that spectrum somewhere in between, the virtues lie between. So that's why, you have cowardice and foolhardiness on the two ends of the spectrum of behavior during war. But then directly in the middle of those two, you have bravery. The virtue is the mean. It's the point where you've exhibited a behavior that calls in action and prudence at the same time. It's calibration. And
yes, basically, don't be an idiot and don't be a cunt.
I don't know if those are the 2 points on the spectrum. I always took it to mean deliberation, like to being deliberate, not deliberation, but being deliberate. The problem with the extreme behaviors is they tend to be more emotional and instinctive. Like if you're afraid of everything, you're going to have cowardice, to use your example. If you're overly risk tolerant, then you tend to be foolhardy. But if you actually deliberately know what you want on that spectrum, that's when you tend to get what they would call courage. But I mean, courage is one of those container words now that people can fill it with whatever they want. So,
well, one of the things I learned when I did a deep dive into psychopaths, basically access to personality disorder.
mm-hmm.
And one of the things I noticed is a psychopath, a borderline one, etc., they're never really scared in the way that normal people are scared. Like, for most of us, the reason why we don't do a lot of things is A, we don't want the consequences, and B, we have a certain risk tolerance that we can live with. And sociopaths just don't have that button. So that's how you can always, like, if someone refers to themselves as unstoppable, that's usually a signal that they're a sociopath. Because everyone is stoppable. Everyone is stoppable.
Yeah, not having a filter for self-preservation or for the feelings of others is generally a pretty good indicator of sociopathy. But again, though, I think getting back to Ryan's, 2 reads from Venkatesh Rao, as a person who doesn't have a military background, I don't necessarily see the value in the OODA loops that he does necessarily. And though both of those books are good, I would prefer Be Slightly Evil over Tempo, because I think that people need to place themselves first more often than they do. And the Being Slightly Evil allows somebody to embrace their, quote unquote, sociopathic side a little bit by allowing them to delve into, what it is that they actually want and what means they need in order to achieve what it is that they want to achieve without necessarily harming other people, but definitely taking a power position in that relationship.
Interesting. All right, well, hey guys, I hate to say it, but we gotta go. We can't do another 4 hours on this one. Carl, Corey, thank you guys so much. Big shout out to Quincy. Guys, don't forget Cursed Fud. Give him a follow. and we're gonna catch you later. Enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy your Ryan is getting a hot stone massage and is having his nails done by the guy who approached me in the mall. So great show, guys. Sorry for being late.
All right, later, everybody.